When I hear you speak, what I hear is an experience of being surrounded by a sense of humility, a sense of unity, and kind of a horizontal way of relating. And I guess I'm going to ask different types of questions. Some will be maybe more challenged, some of these concepts, but how can we as a society today, living in cities, for example, humble ourselves to work and relate in more horizontal ways, like the ways that you witnessed in, with the Penang tribe?
Well, I think coming to something like this is a pretty good start. It is about an awakening. It is about a reconnecting and a healing. It's something that we were talking about earlier. It's like, I do think that so much of this stuff is conceptual and it can stay in the headspace, but actually until it's embodied in some way, until it's like felt, then we're really not going anywhere. So we have to feel empathy, ultimately, empathy for each other so that your pain is my pain, and empathy for the forest so that that tree being chopped down is also painful to me. And there are, the indigenous peoples have methodologies for that too. Some of which is plant medicines, but another thing that was in the film that I made, the team made, that's another aspect of the transition from hunter-gatherer to where we're at now, is that once upon a time, we used to meditate on a daily basis. Hunting is a form of meditation. If you're not in the present moment, you're not going to catch your monkey to feed your family. You're just not going to get it. So you've got to be in your body and senses in a very, very real way, moment by moment. And foraging is the same. It's like you have to be aware. It's like, am I picking the aran lily or the wild garlic? It's like you've got to be. And where is it growing? I'm not just walking along looking at the distance. It's like foraging and hunting together were, for us as a species, a daily meditation. And one of the reasons I liked the guy Ian McGilchrist, who's in the film, that for those of you who saw it, is this amazing brain scientist. He showed that actually, as we've come away from this daily meditation, we've moved into a different way of being and perceiving the world, which is like a left hemispheric way. But regardless of that, it's like we've had a huge shift and we're not feeling and perceiving in the way we used to. So I think that the healing is a huge part of it. But how do you get people who are deeply wounded from growing up in society that we've lost community, we've lost so many narratives of how best to bring up our wonderful children, and everyone's trying their very hardest, but we're also passing on so many wounds. And so it's in everyone's interest. It's no surprise that we've created these narratives which are, don't look inside, just keep moving. Because if you start looking inside, all manner of nonsense is going to come up, and that's painful. So we've got to change that narrative too. And how do we change that narrative? Is like, at the moment, we've been living with the narrative is like, well, some people are just born bad. Some people just have addictive tendencies. Some people, it's like, no. I can take you to a tribe where there's no violence at all. And like that, I couldn't even believe it when I first heard that. But there is a tribe, I haven't visited them yet, but they're well known to, the violence is so minimal that it's seen as some form of like mental disorder. It's just almost completely eliminated. Where's the genetically bad person there? It's just not around. It's always been the environment that's the thing that supports us and that holds us, and it's always been the nurture. And so we need to break these narratives. We're living in a world where the whole idea of looking inside is, for many people, it's just not on the agenda. Oh, don't do that. Navel gazing, you'll just end up like them hippies. But we've got to stop that. And maybe the best way is to point out, look, here are these people. This is how we used to be. And then it's like, okay, well, I can't argue with that anymore. Maybe there is something about the way that I'm living my life. So I think it's a whole bunch of stuff, but I really think that the healing is a big part of it. We got to feel again.
Yeah, I remember watching in your movie, you kind of talk about empathy also as kind of like a stepping stone towards feeling that sense of unity when you were, I forget the name of the festival.
The Kumela.
The Kumela Festival, yeah. I guess I'm curious what you mean by that.
By it being a stepping stone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it's actually, I think it's some of the closing words of the film. It's like, I mean, I alluded to it a second ago. It's like, if I'm feeling your pain, then it's in my interest that you're not feeling any pain. So I've got to feel that shit, you know? And you can't cherry pick what you feel. You can't just open the lid, the Pandora's box, and go, well, I'm only going to feel good stuff. It's like, we just open that lid and it all comes out. And so that's why I said, you know, I think there's no surprise, because even though we've all had our own personal difficulties stepping into the spiritual journey, the healing journey that we've been on, that has brought up stuff that we didn't even imagine, but I think we have no idea how hard it is for some people. It's no surprise that they're unwilling to go there. So we have to have a lot of compassion. But I do think that that's what's needed, and we need to support each other. And there's that great, I'm always referring to TED Talks, aren't I? Jesus. Like, everything you thought you knew about addiction was wrong. And he makes a beautiful analogy. It's like, yeah, so the you know, Bruce Alexander's Rat Park that he talks about, and a whole bunch of stuff. But basically the end of it is like, you know, the opposite of addiction is connection. And in many ways, we've created the perfect society that we would want to be in, except that it's just so terribly bad for us. It's like we've been so successful of being able to do and get everything we want, but we're only just waking up now to the realization that we're in the sweetie shop and we're dying of diabetes, and it's just really unhealthy. And actually, I think that one of those things that we've created is this vast separation. I don't need to deal with my shit if I don't have to see you every day. So I'm just going to live in my house over here and do my thing. Whereas previously, and now I'll go and see a shrink once a week. Whereas previously, I'd have to see everyone every day, and they would have to talk me through where I'm acting like an idiot. And like, we need that, you know. And the more money you get, the more all of the narratives in our society at the moment are taking us all in the wrong direction. It's like, I'll be happy if I have more money. I'll be happy if I have more stuff. I'll be happy if I have more fame. It's like, no, they're all taking us in the wrong direction. And the main direction that's taking us to is towards more individualization and more separation. The more money I have, I don't have to deal with anyone, because everyone's a yes man. The more fame I have, I don't have to deal with anyone. It's like all of that, it's all in the wrong direction. And so these narratives are the things at the heart of what's killing us as a society, I believe. And it's the wisdom of the indigenous that is going to be the antidote to that. But it's going to be hard, you know, because like these messages won't land in some places. But I think that there is still hope. You know, we can heal and go out into the world. What we don't want to do is get into our silos of our little healing collectives. We've got to also get back out into the world. Get back out into the world. And so that's the work.
Yeah, I guess what I'm also hearing is this like leaning into a sense of discomfort, right? As you know, Gabor Mate talks about, you know, addiction essentially as being this longing for connection and a way of compensating that kind of sense of loneliness. And you know, how would you respond to someone who, you know, for example, tries, I don't know, immerses himself in an experience like this, and you know, just shares that they're uncomfortable, and then you know, just opts out and disconnects, says it's not for them, potentially, and says, oh, it's not for people like me. How would you respond to something like that?
Fair enough, in a way. It's like we're all doing our best. We're all trying our very hardest, and it's quite possible that we're too late, and that we have to learn to mourn. Actually, is quite possibly what's really needed. And like, that's a terrible thing to say, but like, one of the other things I've learned from those people is that the force, if applied incorrectly, isn't actually the answer either. We have to inspire. That's what the women did with the men there when they would, it's like, it's not about separation and pushing away and hating. It's like, we have to heal, bring you back. So maybe some people come to the party later. Maybe we've got to create our own thing. You know, and the more that we come together and create, the less we need to be a part of buying into the bigger picture, and that will just dissolve under its own weight because no one's supporting it anymore. You know, we don't need to fight it, we just create something else. Now, I know that sounds ridiculously simplistic and maybe naive, and maybe there will be a time when we actually have to step up and say no. I mean, what am I talking about? We are already in a time when we have to step up and say no, but how? But I also think that it's worth checking in with where the anger comes from. It's like, how often have I seen in my life that when I've woken up to these things, when I got back from the Amazon, I was like in absolute rage. But what I realized much later was that rage was mostly aimed at me and my own shadow, that I hadn't started embodying my own wisdom. Not my own wisdom, but this wisdom that I'd experienced. It's like, that's what I was angry at. I was angry at me and I was shouting to the world, but it's just really shouting my shadow. That doesn't mean to say that anger doesn't have a place. It doesn't also mean to say that activism and all these things aren't vital, but we have to check in with where it's all coming from and look at ourselves and be the change. You know, that's it. And then there's a very different quality of discussion that comes about when you acknowledge that I'm also part of the problem. You know, most of those execs, and I know some of them, who are sitting in their offices just laughing at everyone driving to the charge, you know, in their cars, talking about we don't need fossil fuels. And for them, of course, the thing is, we're all hypocrites, and they're wrong in their analysis. But it's very easy to just dismiss our hypocrite if we haven't also acknowledged that we are that. We have to also go, look, I know that I'm part of the problem too, but how can we figure this out rather than you're because that just separates more and more. And I see that sometimes in the streets. So we have to, that's part of the same journey for me. And I kind of almost wish I didn't say that, because I don't want to diminish the charge and the need and the activism, but like I do think that we have to really be with ourselves. Yeah. Sorry, that's not. You should be. Are you open for? Are you up for a question?
Is that okay? It's more. I don't know if it's a question. It's a comment that I just want to throw into this. That you brought in the Trickster from your experiences, and that there's I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, and in how and what activism could learn from that. And we see it in how we call out and how we call in. That doesn't necessitate the use of anger, or isn't a way of channeling our anger, but it's actually coming from a different place. And so I do think we have to be active in the dissolution of those systems, because otherwise, for me, there's a real fear of a risk of
apoplexy.
We get consumed in our healing bubbles, and actually we're talking about activism means lots of different things, and I just think I'd love to hear you say more about the Trickster energy or quality that you described when the little child comes along and says, "You're not the leader, you're a dick," and it's funny. And it's true, and how have you seen that kind of energy in forms of activism, perhaps in the Western world? Because I do think there's something in that.
Yeah, well, I thank you for challenging, because obviously, and I think I was even alluding to it, that I don't want to be the person that diminishes the drive. I don't, because I believe that it's necessary, and so I welcome my opportunity to reiterate that. Well, that's why I quite like this sort of app idea in a way. It's like okay, you know what? We're just gonna take back the power, but we're gonna do it using the existing system. We're not gonna try and like fight it. We can do this because we're just gonna vote for these people to go into the centre and sort of dissolve it all from there. Okay, that's not necessarily Trickster, but it has something about it that is like, it's a little bit like what Paul was saying. We're just going to do this anyway. We're just going to do this anyway. It's like, where do we best place our energies? And what are the fights that we're most likely to win? How are we going to actually get through this together? and ultimately together. Because I don't want to have like a Guantanamo Bay of all the old CEOs of ExxonMobil who we've just like kicked out because it's like we have to find something that's going to work for us all to come back into the space together ultimately. I think that, and this is probably not a conversation for now, but for later, I think that insight of the women coming together is a really interesting one, and it's a challenging one for today. But there's something in that. I was at COP26 recently, and everyone said, we need parity in the space, we need to have as many women here as many women. And I was just thinking to myself, if the Benjelli women were in this room now, they would go, fuck you, and you'll invite us into your space that you've created under the way that you want to create it, and we'll just come in and have as many seats as you, thank you very much. So if out of the way, we're going to do it our way. And you guys have fucked it up for long enough, we're going to come in, we're going to figure this shit out. Get out. But like, with a whole bunch of laughter and smiles and a bit of a wiggle and a whole bunch of stuff. But you know, you've had your go. We're taking over now. That shit, that's Trickster shit. Hard for me to say, I mean, I just did say it. But I don't know how that lands. And I'm terrified every time I even bring that sort of talk. But that's what I saw. That shit worked. So maybe we'll watch that clip later.
So the concept of speaking to power is an interesting one, especially like in the context of a community versus like in the workplace or you know, the various pressures. So, you know, how can like the everyday person, you know, embody that ability to speak to power when their livelihoods and their incomes are dependent on, you know, people in positions of power, and that, you know, disruption, so to speak, in a context like that could, you know, change everything, could change their ability, you know, to feed their children, for example.
For sure. I'm not, that's why, thank you, great question. And like, you did say you were challenged, so that's put me on the spot. I don't think, I'm hoping that people aren't walking away from here going, right, I'm just going to speak to it wherever I sit. I'm, in a way, painting a picture of what was and what could be. How we go about doing that is going to be a journey. I don't think that, I mean, I'm in the process of writing a book at the moment, and there's one or two things that I know that I have up my sleeve where I could put that in as like, and I saw this person like supremely do this, and so, and I'm like, okay, even in that moment, is that actually the best way for me tactically to move forwards? Maybe it's where I want to be in the long run, but we have to work our way towards that. And so we're all going to have our own journey with that individually. And it's like ownership as well. It's like, you know, all of these things, we're so far away from it. It's like, how am I going to embody maybe this idea around ownership? It's like, start by not calling your children mine. It's like, this one person is not, it's like, let's just start with the basics and then move into, okay, how can I come into community sharing in the local area? You know, it's just the principles that I'm interested in, and then we will find our pathway to get there. So the principle is still the same, that we want to have a space, and there are corporations that are very flat. And there are also cooperatives that are working very well. And so those things, it's like when we start up our, you know, community interest group, it's like, what is the structure that we want to have here? So it's not like every day you got to go home, you got to shout at whoever's there, because they're not in the same space. But and as you say, that might just cause you more problems in your own life than not doing that. But don't let go of the idea of what works best. Don't let someone tell you that, oh, it's ever been thus that we've lived in a meritocracy. That's the bit that I'm fighting. It's like the narrative bit. It's like, you have someone tell you, oh yeah, but blokes have always been. It's like, no. I met this dude who was chatting away and he told me this, and he knows more than you, so fuck off. And so whatever, I don't know, which one feels better? Which one feels better? Is what is it that we want to go forwards? And it's quite possible that this narrative will just be the thing that helps those that build out of the ashes, you know. But even then it's worthwhile knowing it. Even then it's worthwhile knowing it. How did we manage to have the most resilient way of being as a species? And I totally agree with what Paul said. We're not a parasite. We are extraordinary. We are extraordinary. And we actually had it figured out for so long, and it got out of hand. And and there's reasons for that. That had its own story of why we left the tropics and got into these things, because we thought it was working for us. But then probably we had who knows exactly what happened, but something went wrong. Probably because we didn't know agriculture, so we probably had a blight or something. And then Maslow's hierarchy of needs, everyone got a bit weirded out, and so they had to go next door. And then suddenly we're all at war, and that spread like wildfire. And it's like, who knows? But we can undo these things, I think, if we want to. And that's the bottom line. And I do think that tech can help.
Yeah, I hear that. I guess what I hear when you share that is just creating a culture of an openness to feedback and being challenged in some way, rather than let's say like the structures that we kind of have in place now, where there's like a top-down power dynamic, and kind of not doing as told, or not basically kind of going along with things, and as a consequence kind of diminishing, but actually allowing voices to be heard and creating context and space for it to surface.
Definitely, it's beautiful. I mean, these are such big ideas. It's no surprise that no philosopher in history ever imagined that egalitarianism was a real thing, because it's just so far away from anything. It's like literally never even been thought of. It's just crazy to imagine. It's literally the first time I've really understood what another paradigm is. It's like a fish trying to understand what it's like to climb a tree. It's so far away, and yet there it is 95% of our time, and still alive today, and you can go and visit it if you want to. So it's like, that's almost the definition for me of another paradigm, but like so vital. And I forgot the point I was going to make. Crumbs. Remind me what you just said.
I was just talking about creating a culture that's open to being challenged and open to like feedback, right? Regardless of, let's say, the structure of leadership, for example. So let's say more horizontal structures. As an example.
Yeah, Crumbs, I had a direct answer to that. I'm so sorry. No, it's gone.
It's okay.
It's gone. Recently I've been trying to imagine how we could recreate something like this for it to be its own virus to spread. So I've realized that actually the reason that I'm here is because I've touched it. There's a guy called David Graeber who died a couple of years ago, amazing anarchist thinker. And he was living in Madagascar, and I was listening to him talk one time, and he was doing his PhD or something. He was there for 2 years, and it was only 6 months in that he realized that there was actually no structure at all to the society that he was living in. And he just obviously didn't notice it, because he just imagined that there was all of this like structure going on. But 6 months in, he's like, there's no structure at all. Everyone's literally just getting on with their lives. And then he spent the next year and a half trying to figure out what was actually going on. But it took him 6 months, and that was like, when I listened to that, I'm like, oh my God, that's me. I'm exactly the same. I would never have imagined. I was the guy that visited all the tribes all around the world, thinking I'd seen it all. And then I met these guys, and I'd read about egalitarianism. I'd read about these things, but it didn't impact me until I met them. And then I'm like, oh my God, this is another this people don't know about. This is why I'm here now. But I thought, well, maybe the best way for me to talk about this, because often people just glaze over. I'm like, okay, I'm talking to myself again. It's like, if I can recreate that, then that can be its own virus that people can come along and touch and feel and be a part of, and that can be its own thing that spreads, because it's like, oh yeah, I don't want to go and work in the factory. I could do this, and I could be connected to nature. And actually, I thought that would be taking me in this direction of like misery, but it's actually more fun. I'm actually freer in a funny sort of way. And so, yeah, that hasn't happened yet. It's still something that may, but it's hard when you're trying to recreate all of these methodologies and tools. It's like we are all very, very self-identified with our own dreams and our own aspirations and our own directions, and to literally try and be the change and come together and live in community. Firstly, you need to have the privilege of having a space, but that could happen. There will be some people who are living lonely in a house and like, come on in. But like, how do we then hold that, you know, because we haven't been born into this. So so I wrote out a manifesto, and then I was, oh, Bruce, it's your manifesto. I'm like, no, it's not my manifesto, it's like theirs, but I'm just the one that wrote it down. And then also taking myself out of it so that I don't have like the latent power of being the person who had the place initially and who was the founder, and also like how do we genuinely come together and really talk about these topics? Like that's something that I have been up for, and I have been in communication with the group, and it's proved very, very hard. But I think there are people who are up for doing that, and it's like, but you have to believe that what's on the other side of it is greater than the sum of the parts, because it will seem initially like a letting go. We're all in this world of FOMO, looking at everything, and actually to imagine that coming together, dealing with your shit, and then being in a collective is actually more wholesome and will benefit you more in the long run than all of this other stuff that we're doing. Takes some courage, and understandably we're not there. It may well be that people in our nation state might not get there for a while, because we are already incredibly privileged. We are already the 1%. We are already living in an environment that's going to feel the effects of some of these problems later than others. So maybe these messages aren't even for us. You know, maybe we are that thing that's going to crumble and it's going to happen elsewhere. But believe me, that there's something in it. So let's hope they're sweet to us when it crumbles.
So we're coming to time, so I'm just going to ask one kind of last question. Given, you know, all these years of exploration and, you know, immersing yourself in all these different tribes and seeing like how they operate and function and work, have you noticed, could you break down egalitarianism maybe into like, I don't know, if there were like maybe a few building blocks that you've noticed as identified as like potentially patterns in those experiences, maybe just a few?
Yeah, so like I said, most indigenous groups aren't egalitarian. Most of them have got into the game of having a chief, having a shaman, and there's loads of wisdom, and I'm not decrying that, but they're in that same game. So the egalitarian societies are generally known as like the instant return hunter-gatherers, nomadic hunter-gatherers generally. So this is the biggest question I had when I first came across them. It's like, okay, so they lived at a certain time. They were nomadic. They were in the tropics. They had equal access to abundant resources. They had a culture that came from all this time before that brought them to this place. Like, there's no way that can be recreated. There's no way we can get the genie back into the bottle. It's out. It's gone. Until I met Jerome and Ingrid, and they started telling me about some of the principles and the practices, and that's when I realized that actually some of them are transferable. But those principles and practices that are the general traits that these very few groups still have left is this idea of no ownership. So everything is shared fully. And even things like, so when I say principles, it's interesting how even within the different egalitarian groups, they enact these principles differently. Like the Panan, anyone who saw the film last night, the Panan are all about sharing. It's like a stick of rock written through them that they just don't feel right unless they've gone out doing their bit to. It's like going to Burning Man. Everyone's just like trying to give away all their gifts the whole time. It's like that's how they are. Whereas you go to the Benjeli and they have a thing called demand sharing, and it's a lot more buoyant with them. So rather than everyone trying to give away, everyone's just thought, well, you're not using it, I'll take it. And still the same concept, because you can't argue with that. If you're not using it, then someone else will take it. So the concept is still no ownership. And, you know, we have cultures in our own society. Sam was talking about them recently, where they have a similar understanding of like, different understanding of ownership, different understanding of land, different understanding of how to be. So that's one principle: no ownership, no coercion. Not all egalitarian societies have this, but this is an immense one. I just remember what I was going to talk about now. So one of the coercion. I mean, when I talk to parents about this, they like just literally, it's so far away from like any imagining that we might have. But literally, no one is telling anyone what to do. And even a parent to a child, you will never hear it. We had a translation of our thing, and it was like, because there's a bit in the film where it's like, we tell our kids that they've got to keep this sharing culture going, and then we'd sent it to the translator. He goes, no, they didn't tell them. They advised them, they asked them. They never tell anyone anything. And that's at the heart of it. And so if a kid wants to go and live next door with another family, he'll just do it. That's how it is. No one's owning, no one's telling, no one's forcing. And so everyone is growing up fully free in a way that we can't even imagine what freedom might be like. And yet with that freedom, they are choosing the collective over and above the individual. That's the weird bit that's really hard to get your head around, because we've lived in a life of coercion for so long that all we dream of is freedom. But they have every bit of freedom they want, and all they want is the collective. That's just mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. And that's how it was. And it's still there. So no ownership, no coercion, no hierarchy. We've already heard about the hunter. We've already heard about the stop being a dick. It's like no one can, that hunter who was the better hunter, the wiser, the braver, the stronger, like, it didn't mean that they don't allow for following. It doesn't mean that they don't allow for some kind of understanding that this guy is better and we're going to follow him for a while. But it's only ever given, it's never taken, and it's never solidified. So there's no leader with a capital L, but there'll be little leaders all the time. It's like, yeah, you do the baskets better, cool. So that's okay, but you don't get any more for it. You don't get any more for it. You definitely don't get any more credit. You don't get any more praise. If anything, the opposite of praise. They bring you down, just playfully. No, don't forget, we're all in this together. And even if people are not, even if like there was, in both the Panan village I was in and in the Benjeli, both those, they had people who are quadriplegic, for one from polio and another from falling out of a tree, and they're just fed as same as everyone else, and everything comes back and gets handed out, and it's like totally not even thought of as a question. Of course. It isn't providing anything in the same way for society, but like it's just given. So no hierarchy. And then competition, which is kind of similar to hierarchy, is also really not evident there. And that was that's why when I first met the Panan, it was really hard for me to figure out why it was that I felt so different in their company. I don't think that if I hadn't traveled the world living with all of those other tribal groups before I met the Panan, I don't think I would have noticed the things that I'm here now telling you about. It's only because, I've taken a friend to go and visit that group, and it's like if it's one of the first groups you ever visit, you're just like, wow, isn't this amazing? Da 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 da. But because I'd seen all the others, I'm not a romantic about tribal people. I've seen really dark shit going down, and misogyny and destruction of nature, and there's tribal people, amazing, much better than us, but still not exemplary in every case. But then I met these guys, and I'm like, oh no, this is different. So it's only because I had that wealth of experience that it became so clear to me. But it was really hard for me to even know what it was. It's like, there's something different going on here, because competition isn't visible. Hierarchy is not visible. It's like it's something that wasn't happening, so rather than something that was happening. So it's just like, I don't know what's going on, but it's really fucking different. And that was kind of why my journey took me so long to figure it all out. But so I guess they're the sort of principles, and then so I try not to call it my house. At home, it's like, okay, how do I undergo? It's like I haven't actually invited anyone else in there to live with me yet, but it's coming, maybe. And so it's like, how can I maybe reenact these things with the privilege of my life? And I think that I come back, I finish on this idea around the voting and stuff, because obviously we can all do what we can in our own lives. And in many relationships are already relatively egalitarian and what have you, but it's the society, it's the system itself that's not. We have very, very strong power structures. And that's the bit that I think we could start with. And it's like Kant said before the French Revolution. Did I tell this story already? No, he's like, so he was like, because there's lots of people saying, oh, well, you can't give the masses the power because they're just stupid. They'll do another Brexit or whatever. It's like, well, yes, but I can't remember the quote from Kant, but it's like, you can't expect everyone to wake up in the place they're at. You've actually got to give them the power. You've got to give them the power before they start waking up. That's just how it is. You can't do it the other way around. You can't sit in your ivory tower and go, well, look, they're all stupid. No, sorry, guys. You've got to actually... And if you're not going to, we're going to come and get it anyway. And if that looks ugly, then you better start helping to educate us all, because this is what's going to come. This is what's happening. It's coming. So... Let's help each other so that when we start taking the power back, that we and hopefully we can do that before the Chinese and the Russians and all the rest of it start kicking in. I had this. Let's finish with this, Scott. I am talking a lot. I had this ayahuasca vision recently. Maybe I won't finish with this. No, this is too much.
Cliffhanger.
Okay.
Too much of a cliffhanger.
Too much of a cliffhanger. Okay.
Too much of a cliffhanger.
Right. Oh shit! I was like, so the women of the Benjeli came to visit me in my ayahuasca, and they were like, and so maybe if you watch this clip, we probably don't have time, but like, if we have a moment one day to watch this clip, you'll see these women, and they're extraordinary. And it really needs contextualizing because it's like quite full on what they're doing. Anyway, they come to visit me in my ayahuasca, and they're like, "You fucking idiot!" And they're not talking just to me. I know they're talking to like our society. They're like, "You idiot! You idiot! You let it out. You let the spirit out." And I'm like, "What's the spirit?" And then you let the spirit out, and then I realized it's like, okay, you let the spirit out. It's like you let the spirit out. We know what happens when you let the spirit out. Like we've seen the gorillas when they fight, the whole forest gets destroyed. That's what you've let it out. You let it out, and the only thing that's strong enough to get that shit back in the box is by the women coming together. That's the only thing that will do it. You've got to get that shit back in the box. You've let it out, and you're going to destroy everything. Fucking get it back in the box. That was that vision.